This is Nick Kyrgios, and this is Nick Kyrgios' red hat. In defiance of Wimbledon's extremely strict all-white clothing policy, the controversial tennis star was recently seen accepting his 2022 Wimbledon runner-up trophy, in the presence of British royalty no less, sporting a bright red Jordan hat, a highly contentious break of tradition that went viral in the tennis sphere, with many deriding Kyrgios for his apparent lack of tennis etiquette. Kyrgios' reasoning?
Because I do what I want.
Having occurred not only on the heels of numerous other Wimbledon-related spats, Kyrgios' entire career thus far has been overshadowed by his oftentimes erratic and disruptive on-court behavior, from multiple allegations of match tanking, to severe verbal abuse directed towards numerous chair umpires and linespeople, even going as far as directly mocking his opponents' personal lives mid-match. The reason he remains relevant? Kyrgios is good. Very, very good at tennis. Possessing what arguably might be considered one of the best offensive games on the tour today, the Australian has conversely won over legions of fans for his fresh take on what many consider an aging gentleman's game, nixing preconceived tennis player notions by sporting basketball jerseys and headphones on court, employing innumerable trick shots at random, and interacting with crowds on a level unheard of from a top professional, all while remaining one of this year's most winningest, most in-demand players on tour. With a style and attitude so drastically different than those across the net from him, today we're piercing together the many layers of his career thus far in an attempt to reveal the true person behind the Nick Kyrgios persona, to determine if this generation's most contentious player deserves the rampant hostility or is simply misunderstood. As to be expected from a professional athlete whose gamesmanship and playstyle contrast so greatly from his peers, Nick Kyrgios' upbringing was correspondingly unique in many ways. Born to parents of diverse backgrounds, the Australian interestingly descends from royal ancestry, as his mother was raised as princess of the ruling Malaysian Selangor royal family, a title she abandoned upon her relocation to Canberra, Australia. The youngest of the Kyrgios' three eventual children, Nick quickly picked up and was found to be a natural of the sport. Basketball, that was. From waking up early most mornings to watch the Celtics play, to spending hours after school practicing his shooting, Nick was selected at 14 to play for an Australian regional team. A born athlete and competitor, Nick found even greater success playing tennis under his mother's encouragement, where by 10, he was playing in Australia's 12 and under national championships. Whereas Nick's obsession with basketball had no bounds, having embraced the sport's culture and values as his own, the teenager's dual endeavors severely strained the family's finances, and following an offer by Tennis Australia to fund the junior's travel and training at Australia's Institute of Sport, it was decided Kyrgios would dedicate his life to tennis. Significantly overweight, asthmatic, and hating the repetitive drilling forced upon him, the young Australian initially relied on risky, fast-paced serves and ground strokes combined with off-putting trick shots and baseline drop shots to confuse opponents, quickly finish points, and avoid moving his feet to save energy, a trademark style his current tennis game and strategy has evolved around. Following an improvement in diet and a much-needed growth spurt, the leaner and fitter Kyrgios took off in the international junior scene, ascending to the #1 ITF junior ranking by 17 years of age and capturing the 2013 Junior Australian Open title. With whispers and talks circulating through the pro tennis community regarding the ridiculously talented up-and-coming Aussie teen who possessed both a missile-like serve and feather-like touch over the next few years, the 2014 Wimbledon Championships introduced the young talent to the entire world in dramatic fashion, whereas a 19-year-old wildcard, Nick Kyrgios defeated #2 seed Rafael Nadal in the 4th round, dispatching one of the world's greatest ever tennis players with his breakneck pace of play and audacious array of trick shots, garnering praise and support from current and former greats while generating international buzz and speculation surrounding his future Grand Slam prospects. In fact, what became readily apparent to those watching him play for the first time was that Kyrgios approached the sport in a very different, very unique, and perhaps far more controversial way than those playing opposite of him. Utilizing trick shots at random, even inopportune times, going for winners or unapologetically beaming opponents when completely out of position, and maintaining blistering offense no matter the scoreline while simultaneously venting his frustrations and jokes to the crowd, Kyrgios confused competitors and enamored fans, particularly newcomers not previously interested in tennis. While the general populace initially tolerated, even encouraged Nick's alternative on-court attitude and behaviors as being fresh or exciting for the sport, it wasn't long before an ongoing string of incidents and controversies sharply soured public approval, eventual suffocating universal displeasure that threatened to not only end his career, but potentially his own life. Under an intense international spotlight and facing mounting pressures to succeed following his 2014 Wimbledon debut, Kyrgios initially coped with external expectations by deflecting responsibility, claiming that he did not love tennis, and that he was not the type of dedicated player who strived to get better every day. Though it's understandable for a professional athlete to treat their sport as more of a job than lifelong devotion, Nick made it a point to prove as much to those watching. At the 2015 Wimbledon Championships, Kyrgios purposely failed to return a number of Richard Gasquet's serves, and was subsequently accused by the press of tanking the match's second set. Though he denied these claims, he was soon handed an 8-week ban from professional tennis just 1 year later when he blatantly tanked a match against Misha Zverev at the Shanghai Masters, at one point asking the umpire, "Can you call time so I can finish this match and go home?" John McEnroe, who not long prior had described Kyrgios as the most talented player he's seen in the last 10 years, changed his tune thereafter, calling for the Australian to instead retire from the sport, saying in part, "If you don't want to be a professional tennis player, do something else." Of course, these transgressions paled in comparison to the revolving set of controversies and incidents undertaken when he was trying. During a 2015 Rogers Cup match against Stan Wawrinka, on-court microphones picked up this remark made by Kyrgios directed towards the Swiss, followed by further off-camera jabs regarding Wawrinka's alleged involvement with 18-year-old girls. Comments that landed him a further 28-day ban and $13,000 fine. Though Nick's reported affable and cordial off-court personality is said to be in stark contrast to his gruff and unapologetic on-court demeanor, that hasn't prevented the Aussie from landing himself in high-profile feuds with some of the game's greatest. Displeased with Nick's underarm serves, lack of preparation time between service points, and general poor attitude on the tennis court, with Nick once admitting that he purposely meant to beam a ball straight into Rafa's chest to capture a point, the normally reserved and amiable Spaniard said of Kyrgios, "He lacks respect for the crowd, his opponent, and himself. I don't think he is a bad guy, but he lacks a little respect for the public and the rival." Following Nick's barrage of insults lobbed towards Novak Djokovic during the initial COVID-19 pandemic, in which Kyrgios labeled the Serb a tool and that his actions were boneheaded, Djokovic replied in turn, "My respect goes to him for the tennis he's playing, but off the court I don't have much respect for him, to be honest." Worst of all, and the potential catalyst which shifted overall Kyrgios support into disdain, Nick throughout the years has routinely demonstrated a general lack of respect towards many of the game's chair umpires and linespeople, racking up countless fines for insulting and swearing at umpires when receiving unfavorable calls, throwing and damaging equipment mid-match, and otherwise acting out what many consider immature and unprofessional gestures unfit for a professional, holding the current records for most accumulative fines received on the ATP Tour and biggest ever single fine given. Though professional tennis certainly is not immune to hot-headed players, with some of the game's worst-behaved actors regarded today as some of the greatest and most popular to ever play the sport, those players' dedication and playing abilities never came into question. With Nick Kyrgios, as pressure mounted, whispers of wasted potential grew, and overall negative public sentiment reached new heights, Nick withdrew from tennis and life in a far more destructive way than anyone could have imagined. In early 2022, Kyrgios penned a long Instagram post detailing his years-long struggle with mental health issues, describing at length the actions he took as a result of his depression and how the enormity of the public's targeted displeasure had led him to consider pursuing dangerous ideas. He subsequently spoke in interviews regarding his initial inability to cope with the unreasonable expectations following his 2014 Wimbledon triumph over Nadal, recalling how he kept trying, but just ended up snowballing into a dark cloud. That even while winning tournaments was probably drinking 20 to 30 drinks every night, then waking up to play. Closing out the 2021 season, Kyrgios' ranking had sharply fallen from a career high of 13 down to 137 in the world, where without wildcards, he would be out of contention for direct entry into most ATP-level tournaments. For many, it seemed Kyrgios' fire had finally burned itself out, having been smothered down by the weight of his own inability to find meaning in tennis and life. Down, but not out. As wildcard entries playing against all odds, Nick Kyrgios and compatriot Thanasi Kokkinakis were crowned the 2022 Australian Open doubles champions, a tournament which over the span of 2 weeks exhibited a Kyrgios who actually appeared to be enjoying tennis. Joking, swinging freely, and in turn outclassing all opponents with ease. Instead of feigning ambivalence to deflect pressure, Kyrgios for the first time in years let loose with no expectations riding on him, an ingredient evidently key to unlocking the once hyped player many had long forgotten. Flush with newfound confidence and success, Kyrgios has since maintained his resurgent form and focus to claim the status as one of 2022's best comeback players, reintroducing the public to the circus-like, antic-filled atmosphere critical to Kyrgios' strategy, success, and arguably, happiness. A combination that propelled him through to the 2022 Wimbledon finals, a far cry from the shell of a player he had been just months prior. So, is Kyrgios good for tennis? A loaded question, but it depends. Though traditionalists bemoan his use of supposed unsportsmanlike tactics to unnerve opponents and change momentum, Nick's refusal to abide by centuries-old tennis etiquette and playstyle, choosing instead to enjoy himself by pulling out unscripted mid-rally tweeners or discussing play strategy with random fans, has undoubtedly since won over many who might never have watched tennis otherwise, particularly younger fans who view the engaging and comical Kyrgios as relatable. Though impossible to excuse his behavior towards those who govern the sport, and certainly not ignoring the very recent pending court result of his ex-girlfriend's serious charge levied against him, perhaps a refocused, recharged, and more mature modern Kyrgios might just instead be remembered not as the wasted talent, but the talent who redefined how one could be successful in professional tennis. Because behind the exaggerated facade actually lies a player extremely proficient in what it requires technically to win points, particularly in singles. In fact, players such as Kyrgios have worked all their lives to develop certain, yet simple plays guaranteed to be effective at neutralizing any type of opponent thrown their way. Though most recreational players such as you and I may possess the correct technical skills, that means nothing if we're not implementing tried, tested, and researched plays against the right opponent. So if you're a tennis player watching this that loses to people you should beat, unsure of the correct plays developed specifically to take down pushers, serve and volleyers, lefties, etc., then you should check out the Singles Playbook by Fuzzy Yellow Balls, the sponsor of today's video, because inside there are 41 plays that simply, yet effectively show you how to play to your strengths, attack your opponent's weaknesses, and avoid making mistakes. Each page has a diagram of the play and a QR code in the top right corner that takes you to a video explaining how to run it, with the plays coming from some of the best players of all time, like Martina Navratilova, all adapted into playbook format so that mere mortals like you and I can use them from day one in our matches. Best of all, by clicking the link at the end of this video, you will receive access to a free video lesson demonstrating one of the Singles Playbook's most popular and effective plays, home base, designed to help you neutralize aggressive baseliners, just so you can see if what the Singles Playbook offers is right for you. No strings attached. So be sure to click the link on screen now for your free video lesson showing you one of the many plays from the Singles Playbook to take your tennis IQ to the next level.